Well, good afternoon. This is Lehigh County Board of Director meeting on Monday, August 25th, 2025. The meeting has been held in the hybrid fashion, either live in person or via Zoom or the phone call. Lisa, would you please do the roll call for the Board of Directors?
I will. Before I do the roll call, I did want to make an announcement that I think the board is aware we received a letter of resignation from Mark Ramus from our board. For personal reasons, he's no longer able to participate. So I will not be calling you.
Okay, thanks for that.
You bet. Roll call of the board. Amir Famili. Jeff Morgan.
Here.
Ted Lyons.
Here.
Linda Rosenfeld. Here. Norman Cusick.
Here.
Baker. Sean Ziller.
Here.
You're next.
Here.
We have quorum and we have 7 board members present.
Thank you, appreciate that. The package for this meeting was sent in advance in the mail via email, also posted on the website. Reviewing an agenda, any changes on the agenda, Lisa, or any need for an executive session?
We have no changes to the agenda. However, we do have an executive session scheduled for after the close of the regular meeting to discuss personnel.
Thank you, appreciate that. Moving to the approval of the last meeting, Linda, would you please?
I move that the minutes be approved.
Right. Okay. Everybody eating, so thank you, Linda. So motion made by Linda and second by Ted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any public comment on the items which is not on the agenda?
I have no comment, thank you.
No, thank you, Amir.
Thank you, Jenny and Brian. Okay, moving to the action items. The first topic that we have under finance and administration is a targeted staff assessment. This is for discussion only.
Yes, and as we are teeing that up, I'd like to acknowledge that Kevin Baker has joined the meeting. So we have all board members present today. So just to give a little bit of an introduction on this topic, last year around this time when we started working on the 2025 budget, we had a lot of discussion about staffing needs of the organization and how we were going to be fulfilling the needs for the foreseeable future as we look at some major program enhancements like our lead replacement program, our I program, the growing capital needs of the organization. So we took that feedback from the board to heart, and earlier this year put a scope of work together for what we are calling a targeted staffing assessment. So rather than looking at the whole organization, which is a very large effort to undertake, we wanted to focus in on a few key areas that are pain points for the organization. So we focused on things like the lead program, the I&I program, and some of the things we'll hear about in a little bit. We hired EMA to do this work, which is a consulting firm, utility management consulting firm. I haven't used EMA in a little while, so you might not be familiar with them, but we do have Sealy Gold and Ryan Moreau, have that right, here today from EMA to introduce their organization as well as provide some recommendations that they've developed through the course of this study. So we have a presentation to share, and we'll turn it over to Celia and Ryan. Is that a good enough tee up for you all?
Yes, wonderful.
Okay, great.
Well, nice to meet you all, and thank you for having us. It's been a bit since EMA has been engaged with LCA, so I'll just say that we're a smaller employee-owned firm based out of St. Paul, Minnesota, who's been working in North America with water and wastewater utilities in the engineering, technology, and management services space for about the last 50 years. And we've been really excited to engage on this targeted staffing assessment, and it's been a very collaborative, though brief effort So you can take the next slide. We looked at 4 of your programs and were kicked off in the middle of June. So it's been through interviews and RFI, request for information, that we've developed our understanding of the program's current states to try to assess where to next with how to manage the growing workload.
Yep. Oh, I can kind of touch on more on that. So, yeah, the evaluation is really on these 4 main programs here. And it was kind of working with the LCA team to understand what the program objectives are, what your goals are, and kind of what the requirements are going to be short-term and longer-term in the future for primarily staffing needs, but we wanted to also make sure that we focused on process and technology related stuff that affected staffing. So the overall assessment kind of touched on those 3 areas for these 4 programs that we'll talk about here in the next slide. So kind of our overall approach for the staffing assessment was obviously the staffing component is important, and that kind of falls under the organization phase, but we also wanted to look at your current practices and processes. You know, what are you doing to measure the efficiency and the effectiveness of those processes? What are some performance metrics that you follow to make sure that, you know, projects and initiatives are running to completion the way they're supposed to be? And then from an organizational perspective, that's the staffing and the looking at, you know, what the gaps are. Some of these programs are very new, they're starting up, they're starting to ramp up. What are some of the people that you need now and into the future to complete your goals, whether that's compliance related or just project completion related? That's something that we looked at in close detail. And then the technology component. What are some tools that you are using now that are making your life easier? What are some tools that you may be using that, you know, maybe making things a little more difficult? So we kind of looked at that assessment from a staffing perspective and really analyze some of the tools and data management practices that you're using. Is there stuff that are saving time? Is there stuff that's reducing manual tasks, or is it you know, adding more time to the things that you're doing as a whole?
Quick question, what methodology do you use for this assessment?
Sure. Well, we did include some AWA or AWWA benchmarking comparisons, but because of the scope of the and the schedule, what it looked like was gathering information through RFI and interviews, and bring that in cross comparison to the programs and what we know of the greater organization, to understand how programs like LED, who don't necessarily have a team unto themselves, how is the workflow looking to engage the different team, departments, units, and individuals who are contributing to that program, and what does the workflow efficiency look like? Because some of the newer programs like LED don't have much in terms of documentation of SOP or standard operating procedure. Oftentimes it was just through interview and data gathering that we understood the basis for which the programs are operating. Your comparison was often between the contract costs and data comparison to the data available in-house, which there were at times gaps to compare the cost of completion for equivalent work that is being contracted out at times, to understand what is a competitive contract.
I think you know, I was looking for more like there's a CI methodology, continuous improvement, that look at the workflow. They look at where it goes from hand to hand, trying to see where are too many hands or has to touch in that step, how you can remove that. Because staffing only happens when you look at the whole flow.
Right.
Because only adding without understanding the flow, it doesn't make sense. So I was trying to see what methodology have you used to go through this process. Have you gone through the CI to look at the workflow, look at the handoff, look at each step, how many people touch that project to reduce the inefficiency and where are the efficient that we have to transfer the best practice to other areas.
Sure.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah,
Understood.
the scope of work was really limited to just a couple days of interviews on site. And it was focused on this framework at EMA. We do use this operational OPT framework is what we call it, to make sure that we touch on all three of those areas to understand like what's really going into these staffing metrics and what's kind of what you're saying as far as a continuous improvement plan, focused on all these separate areas and not just we need people here. Why, you know?
And I think that because of the lack of process documentation, the formal execution of that process was not fully in scope or attainable, but certainly you'll see as we discuss our recommendations, it extends beyond just the addition of FTE. And we are discussing the opportunities for improved data collection so that next year, this time, the budget is needing to be approved. There's a better basis for the comparison between insourcing and outsourcing, and there's more visibility into the true cost of completion for some of these tasks that are being considered for outsourcing.
And if I could add, if you don't
Certainly.
mind, I could add, these 4 areas specifically were targeted because they are so new and we're not doing the work currently. We're doing pieces of the work, but we're not actually doing the work now. So there's not a lot of practices or processes to analyze from a CI standpoint, as you're saying, Amir. We're talking about potentially insourcing some work that we don't currently do. So it's not a ton of opportunity for that kind of analysis.
And as we go through this, to start out, we're going to talk more around the process and technology component, and then we'll go more into the staffing recommendations. And I think it's important to start with the process and technology because it affects all the different programs. And so one of the things that we noticed was as an overarching theme that throughout all 4 of the programs was the need for kind of a technology and data master plan. We found that there were kind of multiple non-integrated systems where they made it a little bit difficult to collect data to make certain comparisons, like data accessibility and quality when it came to insourcing and outsourcing. We did some preliminary analysis there and really found that there was some more work that needed to be done to really get a stronger idea of what insourcing could take for some of these programs. And like Lisa said, some of them are so new that we haven't even started doing some of the work to really fully evaluate what it's going to take. Software purchasing governance. One of the things that we observed is there are some one-off software purchases here and there that may serve individuals, but they may not necessarily serve the organization as a whole as we move forward with these programs. And then some training and change management around some of these softwares. There is a little bit lack of SOPs on how people should be using certain software applications from an organizational perspective. That we think, if you gained alignment on that, it would really help people understand, what the objectives are of using some of these technology tools. So that leads us to our overarching recommendation of just, what can a data and IT governance plan do for you in terms of helping you sort of solve some of these problems and start down the path of having a technology and data master plan. So to do that, starts with kind of assessment of your current and planned systems. There's definitely some cost savings that could be associated with that as well as you look at systems that, maybe one-off that could potentially be consolidated down. And then from a data management perspective, how much can you get your data centralized into potentially one system? and that touches on the data architecture map. And then the government's framework for technology investments. We touched on that. We think that's super important to have a framework in place that dictates all of your software purchases. Then the system integration redundancy review, looking at how systems are going to interact before potentially purchasing a new software system. How is this system going to interact with the organization and the systems as a whole, to make sure that data quality and reliability and accessibility are at the forefront of any sort of purchase. And then the last bullet there just kind of touches on what an established IT governance plan would do, which would establish roles and committees for governing how technology is sort of managed throughout the organization. So we thought that was an overarching theme that was kind of important to cover right at the top as we go through more of these slides.
So are we gonna, as we go through this, are we gonna assign a champion for this technology assessment that they have put here? Hold that person accountable to develop a plan, to look at some of the recommendation they have?
Yeah, so what we're gonna see kind of coming out of this study or this work with EMA will be, first of all, because it's budget season, we'll see some recommendations in the budget review for some of these things, so we have resources available. But also when we look at our 2026 overall strategic priorities, they're very much mirrored with these, with these recommendations, and they will have a person's name attached to them.
So we'll have a champion to manage the overall this recommendation.
Yeah, someone want to raise their hand of who that might be?
Yeah, we know
Higher?
who it is.
A little higher?
We know where his office is too.
Yeah, that one is firmly in our 2026 plan, and you'll see it actually a little bit in our capital plan presentation as well.
Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Next slide. Right, so we know that the CMMS evaluation is underway, and the opportunity to reevaluate CityWorks, the current CMMS, as a valuable tool if re-implemented, or a candidate for replacement if it is determined to not meet the needs of the larger organization, is one, one example of the need for a data architecture master plan. It is a common instance we see at utilities in this day and age. They've been taking on more technology over the last few decades, and there comes a point where they back up and say, wow, we have a lot of systems on board. Some of them are kind of in their own silos, not speaking very well to each other, and this clutters how useful they are. So wanting to make sure that we are taking a process first approach to the evaluation of a core system like a CMMS. This is underway. Certainly, we know that requirements are being gathered from stakeholders as they move forward into with an RFP and vetting the vendors that are available in the market that might be good candidates. But we're just reiterating here the importance of including all stakeholders in that conversation, assessing how the field staff are using the system at present, to help try to clarify process improvement and the direction that is being pursued. Whether that is defining future state workflows. We understand that the technology that is selected will have an impact on what those future workflows look like, but the best practice here is to be clear on how you want this system to support your practices, as opposed to assuming the processes that are being pushed by the technology. So,
Question.
please.
I'm having a hard time with the big macro approach.
Sure.
Could you give me an example of exactly what you're talking about?
Certainly. So at present, we can see in the data from the CMMS system that there might be some work not being captured by field staff.
An example.
Completing a work order on a emergency emergency work that has arisen in the field, whether that a customer has called in and that was flagged, or Andrew gets a message from someone that there's something that needs to be tended to now, a field staff or crew is deployed to take care of that. And they don't complete in the system documentation of the work that they have that they did. So whether or not that is a common instance or not, the assessment of data that we were able to take on, though not largely the priority of what we were doing here, but important task to try to understand what all the field staff is managing at present, gave us reason to want to further evaluate, how the field staff is using the CMMS and if all work is being accounted for. One example, we also know that plenty of folks in this room right now also aren't receiving the information they need to inform the decisions, their management decisions, from what the CMMS data shows. So they, might submit a report and they can either tell that the outputs are not accurate, or the fields are not being completed, or the fields don't exist in the system to capture the information that they need to report out. All of this are part of the pain we've heard about in using CityWorks as it is currently configured. We also hear that there is an openness to evaluating CityWorks for re-implementation, knowing that technology is not the silver bullet that will solve all of our problems. It is an important, partner in the process. And if it isn't workable, then sometimes we have to move forward with a different solution. But that might be one example of something to consider when evaluating how the CMMS is currently being used, and and creating metrics that can help track improvement towards better CMMS utilization. So like I said, I want to reiterate, this is underway. And the exercise has largely been undertaken to consult the stakeholders who desire to see better outcomes from the CMMS. But this will be a continued priority as the CMMS evaluation unfolds. Another process recommendation, so we haven't gotten to necessarily staffing recommendations. We're still in the realm of improving data quality, or opportunities to improve data quality and access, and how we are, manipulating data to help us track the projects that are underway for capital works and asset management, to understand the stability of the critical path activities. And that usually breaks down into keeping a keen eye on schedule, budget, and scope or quality of the work. So we know that there's currently a project excellence program to help bring more awareness to metrics that will help us keep an eye on the completion of the ongoing projects being undertaken by the Asset Management and Capital Works group. But the recommendation here is to pull back to some key metrics. So we're saying 10, let's say, to help create some focus on the critical components that can trigger action, whether that's internal or working with contractors out of house. So for schedule, we might look at the % of milestones being provided on time, or there's the schedule performance index, which is dividing earned value by plan value. And if that index is less than 1, that gives us a reason to kind of take a deeper look at the schedule adherence. And same thing with budget. There are index options that we would like to see front and center for assessing project health, and with triggers that will inform the need for action when there's slippage in the targets for these metrics. This is well underway. We know that AJ has brought together many of the project managers to contribute to the Project Excellence Program, but this could be an evolution to, for the benefit of the greater organization, keep more keen eye on the needs for escalation where contractor or in-source projects might be falling off. Now, there's lots of quantifiable inputs to these key projects that need to be considered. Certainly, you cannot only assess project health based on indices, but this is what we're putting forth as an option for improving visibility across the organization here.
AJ, where do we stand on implementation of the project management system that we're working?
Yeah, so Procore is well underway. We're probably about 22% of our projects are in Procore. New projects, when they start up, are being added into it. So that's going well. Being used on current projects. People are happy with it. It's being used to manage the construction work, but also to communicate across departments.
Are you setting up some metric she was talking about that on the quarterly basis, you can measure the health of your pipeline?
Yeah, so we have what City was talking about. We have a metric in place right now, and the commentary was to try to narrow them. I think we have 16 or 17 that we're tracking. So there's budget, there's schedule, there's responsiveness, there's safety. We've got a dashboard of a lot of things, and EMA is recommending, distill those down into a few that, maybe can be a little more easy for the rest of the organization to follow. So we're definitely going to be doing that.
Thank you.
And I think this could also, so the opportunities associated with this might be to help guide more precise scheduling and planning from project creation. It might impact how contracts are being designed so that they're milestone based. If, lots of different types of projects being managed by LCA. So there might even be opportunity for slight variation in the criteria based on different project categories. We know that common delays in procurement and permitting are to be expected, but hopefully a closer eye on these key components of project health could create a learning culture for improvement on how schedules and budgets are reflecting some of these opportunities for delay that are largely outside of the hands of LCA, so external impacts. We want to see more alignment in project management practices across the organization, which certainly is underway, so that we can continue to evaluate and improve project performance metrics, and then see if there's a need for more project management capacity in-house once there is more alignment on how that role is being executed, as opposed to, more or less bringing more cooks into the kitchen. We want to get clear on where the need is, and then to take on additional resources with hopefully more clarity.
Is this what you're talking about? Are you talking about basically FEMA's or PFEMA's process failure mode and effect analyses that you chart? You look at things that can go wrong and do routinely go wrong to minimize the risk of that. And in quality circles, it sounds like that's where you're headed, but
Sure,
I'm not
and
sure if
that
that's-
might be more asset manager, and that could be a opportunity for certain project types where those metrics are pertinent, but those might not be across the board. So there might be opportunity for addition or subtraction of those one-off metrics where needed.
If I could just add,
Sure.
I think kind of boiling it down, what we're really talking about is standardizing project management process. Training and getting, those things documented and on board and measuring this project success criteria so that we can have a better way of analyzing project performance and then project workload by project manager.
And
It's
this
difficult to know that now
Sure.
without that data.
This is just as much about helping to keep contractors accountable to certain metrics as it is in-house. Certainly, we see that when these are not a component of how we are engaging with the contractors in terms of the success of their work to completion, there's that opportunity for slippage. So when we're managing contractors, this is a great language to communicate through. So now getting into the staffing recommendation summary. We want to acknowledge that some of these roles were repurposed from what was kind of in the preliminary budget or purview for this year's additions, but we will go into greater detail what these roles might look like. Slide. So for the lead program, we're talking about the addition of a lead program administrator, which would be a repurposing of the discussed lead CSRs, so customer service representatives. We see an opportunity to evolve that role into something that could serve both Allentown and suburban, unlike the CSRs who are currently siloed between serving either of those customer populations. And also hearing, about the need of Rennie and others who are managing the program at strategic levels to help with some of those programmatic needs, maybe workflow adherence once that is further underway, task tracking and coordination. Here too, we see an opportunity for a Spanish-speaking candidate to be a benefit as an escalation for questions that CSRs cannot manage at this time to prevent the burden of customer requests being escalated to those like Rennie, Anthony, Gretchen, Gretchen, the lab manager, creating some unneeded strain because of the process inefficiency of someone like her having her voicemail fill up with one-off customer requests. We only imagine that customer interaction as it relates to the lead program will increase as the workload ramps up. So this would be an opportunity to gain some of the benefits of the CSR role while also hopefully being able to proactively manage some of the customer requests through self-service.
Just for clarity for the board, last year we had included in the budget a staff addition for a customer service rep focused on the lead program. That position has not been filled because we've been.
There was two customer services positions, is that right?
Just one for the
One?
lead,
Okay.
yeah, one for the lead program. We haven't filled that position because of the unknowns around how the program will be defined and developed. And now we have a little more clarity about what Rennie's role is now that we've had, he's been on board for a few months and his needs as well. So it's really a shifting of a current budgeted position.
So the program lead is a different for the administrator, is that correct? Because we hire somebody to manage the whole program, is that correct?
Right, yeah, so Rennie's with us today, and he
Yeah.
can share more about what his role is if you'd like to dive into
No,
that.
no,
But
that's fine.
his role is at the high level, managing all things lead, making sure we're compliant with EPA, developing the program to replace all the lead service lines, the inventory, all of that. But because of the heavy customer facing requirements of the program, having someone who can be a point person for that is what.
That person, either dotted line or solid line, would report to him.
Solid line to Rennie.
Thank you.
So what happens now if somebody calls with a complaint? So how does that, just briefly, how's that handled?
Well, so, I mean, if we're focused
In
on.
general.
In general, if someone's calling about a complaint, they'll call into customer service.
Right.
And the person taking the call will triage as best they can to try to answer the question. I mean, 90 times out of 100, it's a billing question, so they can answer it on the first call. But
Right.
if it's something that's water quality related or lead related or some other project related, then they get transferred out to other people who can handle.
And is that what you're thinking here for any lead complaints, or is it gonna be like a separate phone number, or?
What we're
Just
thinking is that
the same line?
the calls will escalate from customer service.
Okay.
So if it's basic stuff about confirming a scheduled appointment maybe, or where do I sign up for such and such thing related to lead, the customer service reps have enough information to handle that. It's really more on the tactical side where we've got contractors in the field and you know, they have questions about what's happening on the street, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Right, and we did evaluate the call log currently being managed by the call centers to understand what the call volume was associated with lead in the last 18 months or so. And we saw that there were 92 lead-related calls that were tagged from Allentown customers, with 20% of those received during a 3-day period, seemingly following that November mailer. And then in suburban, there were 152 lead tagged calls, with 32% occurring during that same 3-day spike. So that was one attempt at trying to understand what the call volume looks like, and also dissecting what those calls were about. There might be some opportunity for improving the current lead-free webpage on the LCA website to really call out some of the self-service options to get some of the information those folks might be inquiring about. You know, there are lots of complications that make this program especially challenging for the likes of LCA with their large renter population and things that can complicate the communication to customer.
If I could add in as well, Amir, the question about the head count. In addition to the one customer service rep position that we have not filled or we'd like to replace with this, we did have 2 canvassers in the budget. So that's
Right.
probably what you're thinking of.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and this ties in really well to this because we have hired the 2 canvassers, and there's a field supervisor that kind of manages their work. His name is Anthony Morales. And right now, his LCA cell phone is who people call instead of customer service to get, you know, clarification of what's happening in the field, or to speak with someone in Spanish about an inspection or all kinds of things. So he is really doing double duty in that role as a lead administrator for that field work and actually out in the field doing the work. So this will be a huge relief valve for him.
So trying to create kind of a single point of contact, right?
So sticking with the lead program, as the program starts to ramp up, we identified the need that it would be a good idea to really increase your utility technicians, the field services, guys that are responsible for doing much of the field with the lead program and many other areas as well. So we identified 4 FTEs to basically be focused on you know, some of the line pulling for the lead, and then 1 FTE for suburban division canvasser. You know, as we had mentioned, this is a new program and it's starting to ramp up. The cycle 1 work is scheduled to start here at the end of this month. And we have a current crew that's deployed that is largely focusing on a lot of different replacements associated with leaks. There's a backlog of these replacements in the system currently that they're still not quite able to keep up with. So the justification as well is that there's some lease concession work that is paused as these technicians focus on these related tasks. And it's the concession compliance metrics are banked from previous years. So the compliance measures are being met, but as we move forward, into Q1 of next year, those concession lease agreements, like the CCTVs and the inspections and stuff, are going to have to continue. And in order to do some of this concession lease agreement stuff and continue with the lead program at its current rate, and as it starts to ramp up into cycle 1 and cycle 2, there's just a justification for an additional crew that can aid in starting to focus on some of these lead line replacement activities here moving forward. Another thing we identified with that crew was significant, levels of overtime. And there could be some work-life balance improvements as well by hiring this additional crew. I think one of the metrics was 70% of the crew was less than 2 years on the job, so the retention rate is high. It's tough or low. It's tough work. So we think that as you move forward and this lead program stuff starts to ramp up, it'd be beneficial to have another crew. And as well as that, there's 2 line pulling equipment machines, excavators that need to be utilized by 2 separate crews. And so having another crew will be able to fully utilize the equipment that you have on site right now to maximize your internal capacity for pulling lead lines.
These are 10,000-hour overtime. That's Andrew's organization, is that correct? Chris's. So that's 10,000 hours, 5 FTE, correct? Because FTE is about 2,000.
Labor only.
Pardon me?
2,000 hours.
2,000 hours, so that's basically, so if we hire these 5 people, we should be budget neutral.
But then again, the overtime isn't currently addressing any of the lead capacity, lead line work, or, the overtime couldn't necessarily be eliminated in the short term, though long term, if there was opportunity to repurpose some of these, long-term post-lead work, potentially some opportunity to repurpose some of this staff to bring down the overtime.
And we should probably do a finer level of breakdown for that to answer that question, because the 10,000 hours is like the whole department, right, Chris?
Right.
So included in that is emergency work, main breaks, those kinds of things, which, the unplanned stuff you have to pay. But we are doing planned overtime to try to keep up with all of the work, which could be eliminated or greatly reduced.
I think it's useful for the board to understand if we're hiring people to gain efficiency and reduce overtime and better work-life balance, what is that? Is that 2 or is 3 or is 5? I mean, definitely having people on that program picking up is really essential, right? And I know that we're going to ramp up the program. We're not going to hire all 4 of them at one time, but understanding if there's always a pinch that we have to put even 5,000 hours of overtime, that really impact safety, work-life balance and all that. So those are something that I think as a board, we have to be, Thank you.
And before we move on this slide, I'll just add that the cycle 1 work, so this is what is being classified as the pilot for the lead field, 100 removals is what's being targeted. That is being delayed because of some city, that has been delayed until now because of some city approval delays, correct?
Not so much delays, just the approval process.
Process, yet we feel strongly that protecting field staff to focus on that workload is going to be important to collect the data on what it costs to execute this type of work in-house.
So that when it comes to needing to go out to bid for more support, because certainly we're not indicating that all the lead removal work should be managed in-house. There will be a better understanding of what it truly costs to do the work in-house so that we can drive towards more competitive, one component towards better information and understanding what we can hope to expect from those contracts.
Chris, can you clarify the lease concession work that's been delayed or paused? What exactly are you referring to there?
So we've slowed down, paused some of our valve exercising, a fair amount of our CCTV work.
Okay.
We're focusing solely on our kind of high stress areas. So anything else that would have been extra beyond that. So all of our daily, weekly, monthly jetting routes, we're keeping up with and we're maintaining all of that. But anything that stretches beyond that, we're kind of only working on it as an emergency basis. Those are the two primary ones that kind of took a hit this year.
Just to follow up, so have you used, to me, CCTV work is easily bid out and contracted out, for if you need support. I mean, to me, that's an easy one where you don't have to hire, you don't have to buy new equipment. I don't know if you've done that or considered that.
I mean, honestly, it's kind of from comparing it to internal staff costs, it's a little cost prohibitive. I mean, we can do it. We had a really good year last year, and we're lucky enough that the city will allow us to kind of do a little carryover.
Okay.
So in preparation for what we knew was coming, my guys in Q4 last year really kind of dug in and built up a little bit of a bank so we could coast a little bit this year, specifically because of the lead pilot study.
Next slide.
Okay, so now we're getting into some of our I&I program recommendations. This is just an overview slide to kind of illustrate, where we're at now, where we want to be, and kind of what the path forward is, and hopefully a concise way. So, kind of where we're at now, we're working with DEP for feedback on the Act 537 plan to as we move forward, so that we can acknowledge flow reduction and make sure that our protocol is accepted through them. Some other things that we ran into during this was some internal insourcing costing data is kind of incomplete, and that's really because we're not really doing any I&I work internally. So that will kind of follow into some of our recommendations. Most of that stuff is being contracted out. During our evaluation, we noticed that there was some higher contract costs that we'll look more into. And a lot of that had to do with just kind of minimal bids around that. And right now we have some SES pilot programs that are in place that are sort of evaluating, long term, what is this work going to look like under the Act 537 plan, so we can develop a plan, formalize the plan moving forward. So desired for future state, formalize some of the DEP protocols. And really nail down what quantification looks like, and get that okayed, but with DEP moving forward. One of the pain points that we ran into was kind of the idea of understanding what's coming from public and the private side. There's not much visibility into the private side at this time, that moving forward that we'll have to get a handle on to really fully understand where the I&I is coming from within our model. And then develop more in-house capacity for doing some of the I&I inspection work, the manhole inspection work, some of the manhole rehab. A lot of this field type work, fully capable of doing in-house. We need to add extra manpower to do it. So kind of the path forward is document the results of the Trout Creek study. And formalize, what the plan is going to look like moving forward, so that can be repeated throughout all the rest of the sewer sheds. Improve kind of the cost labor data, so we have an understanding of moving forward of why are our contracts so expensive and what's going to cost to start insourcing some of this, and what that gap looks like, and start to benchmark some of these contractor contracts, and then use the SSES pilot to kind of guide the program strategy, and future staffing plans moving forward.
So do we have the know-how in-house for manhole rehab?
Yeah, the items that I think we really targeted in this study are the things that we kind of already do or have knowledge to do. Like Chris mentioned, we're doing lots of CCTV work all the time. Having it be paired with the program would be just an extension of what they already know how to do. Construction and manhole rehab is something they know how to do, but getting them programmed to achieve the specific goals of the I&I effort.
And so just kind of a breakdown of the contracts that we evaluated as part of this. Current ongoing contracts were roughly, $9 million in value. The total contractor FE to FTEs we estimated were about 10, based on the work to date and how long those contracts are. And if we look towards the future, we can see that, through 2028, there's significant opportunity to look at some more SSES opportunities with 2.25 million that's planned in the future. And then manual rehab contracts that total 5.5 million in the future. And that's invoicing costs. Further evaluation will need to be done to figure out how much of that's going to be, field work that you'll be able to do. But as we, look to evaluate, your current active contracts, our estimates are it's about, 4.2 million potentially that's invoiced in field work that, should be looked at moving forward to try to see how much of that could be insourced and what that's going to look like in the future. And so that leads us to our first recommendation, which is, add 3 utility technicians solely focused on some of the I&I related tasks that we talked about, such as inspections, manual repairs, and rehabs. Currently, LCA only has 1 FTE focused on I&I related work. As they start to ramp up this program, we think it's important to start developing internal capacity to really understand the work that needs to get done. And this also will help to understand and help to better negotiate, contracts when it comes to outsourcing, to really understand, what the gap is there as we start to do some of this work. So short term, the insourcing costs need to be fully understood. Having these I&I related technicians focus on this work will better help evaluate what these insourcing costs are going to be. You have some contractors that are doing this work now that I'm sure they'll work closely with to make sure that the work processes are fully understood moving forward. Our preliminary analysis, like I said, with the contracts on the last page, shows that there could be some cost savings associated with insourcing the work. And there is some equipment capacity to do some of this stuff in-house. We just need to kind of get the ball rolling and start the program and see what that looks like. And, overall, having this ability to do some of this stuff in-house is also going to contribute to a better understanding of what the pace of work is going to look like. So DEP can get a good idea of what that looks like as part of the 537 plan as you work with them to establish this program moving forward.
This recommendation is based on 2 factors. One, DEP direction, and second is the cost analysis of fully costed having a person in-house doing the work versus going to a contractor. So those things has to happen first. Is that correct?
So the insourcing costs were evaluated, but that's one of the things that led us to the recommendation of the data master plan, because there was a little bit of gaps with we were basically the invoicing costs. We had that from the contractor, but there's a little bit of a gap in some of the insourcing costs. We didn't have the direct overhead rate of what it truly costs to have somebody internally hired. So it's mostly just labor costs that we had in our analysis. So there needs to be a little bit more of a deeper dive to compare apples to apples for insourcing versus outsourcing costs to fully understand that. But what we do know, the known information that we were provided is that the contract costs are very expensive. And one of the things that hiring an initial internal crew will help with is really starting to understand what the insourcing costs are going to be to get them doing some of this work.
I think I'm struggling. We can't go halfway. Either you are in or not. so to speak, right?
Right.
Because you have to know the cost of one FTE fully cost, right? Including pension, everything, right? Vacation, all of that, that become the cost of one FTE. And then you have to look at, okay, if you take one project is gonna take, one FTE, if you source it outside versus, outsourcing or insourcing, now you compare the cost, including the material, which one is, more cost effective. But before doing that, you wanna hire a person and then do analysis. It just sends me to be backward.
Well, we can back up to say that those initial process recommendations, and when it comes to evaluating how field staff are using the CMMS and improving the quality of data that we have on how much time they're spending on each of these unique work order types, will help us understand, improve the basis, the data basis on which we are making these decisions. However, in the near term, we see that some of the contracts currently being engaged in for I&I work completion could almost be deemed predatory in terms of their costs in comparison to what it takes to do in-house. So the opportunity to increase the staff in-house for some of this I&I work, not CCTV per se, or those tasks that have extremely high equipment costs, could be an opportunity while improving the processes to understand, kind of, not trying to seek perfection before we move forward, but still making it a priority in tandem.
I'm on the philosophy, show me the data, then I give you the money.
Yeah.
Don't give me a philosophy, give me the data. And what you're saying is a philosophy. I would like to see the data, right? And then based on data, you decide which one is more cost, economy, cost effective to go.
And
So till that analysis is not been done, right? You can't, if the cost of internal, because of FTE, vacation, all that, fully costed, is twice that external things, it doesn't make sense to go, right? And I don't want to hire, if you want to hire 3, then you might as well go 10 and bring everything internally. But you have to do that cost analysis.
So Amir, I would just chime in. I think, definitely think what you're saying is correct, and we should look at it, because if you just look at it from a basic standpoint, anything that's bid out that's construction, we pay prevailing wage. So that jacks up the contractor cost to start. So the internal costs could certainly, if it's not a professional service, and CCTV is some kind of on the edge because you're not really building or repairing anything, but any of that, I think it's worth looking at, getting the numbers, but I would just think off the cuff, that factor alone probably leads it to be more beneficial to do it in-house, but we should see the numbers to confirm it.
Even, I agree 100%. I think there are portion of the work on manhole, because there are various components. There are components that you can do internally because of exactly what you're saying.
Right.
There are components that you have to outsource. I think it's nice to know those analysis, so we added the people to know which direction we are going.
Question. The assumption is that the in-house people can do work as efficiently as the outsourced people. Is the labor market such that we can hire people with those skill sets? So when they hit the ground, they'll be running. Is that a reality right now with the labor market that you're gonna?
I think yes and no. I think we can hire people. We've had good success in keeping, even though we've had high turnover.
Yes, I heard
we've
the
had good
turnover.
Success in getting them.
That's what I'm concerned about. Yeah.
And there is a training curve
Yes.
for that, but it's a relatively short training curve, especially if it's for specialized work. And we're hiring people who have basic construction type and equipment operation skills. Crystal, if you want to add anything to that,
Right, and
ramp up.
Yeah, to that end, it's already stuff we do when we're free or able. There's only one specialized piece of equipment that we would need to get for the manhole rehab, and it's sub $100,000, so it's not remarkably expensive. We have all the excavators we need. We need the bodies, we need the guys that we can put, get dirty shoes. And it is stuff that we do, we do it when the emergencies arise and we have to rent a piece of equipment, we've done it. I believe we can be as efficient, if not more efficient. The request was for 3 FTEs specifically for the, I'm gonna call it manhole rehab. I recognize there's a whole bunch of other stuff involved in that. But the current crews that we have doing it now through the outside contractor is 5. They have 5 guys on site.
Yeah.
3 of them helping hold up the shovel and making sure that the dust doesn't blow away. I think internally we can do better than that. I know internally we can do better than that. I have full confidence in my team.
Nobody doubts that.
Yeah,
Nobody
please.
doubts that LCA staff are the best, right? I think at the end of the day, the board has a responsibility to make decision what financially makes sense for them. So we have to, it is essential, that we see the number and show that it's more efficient to bring it internally. And then but we gotta do the work for it.
And we will be providing a report in addition to this slide deck. So much of the exercise that you're saying is needed has been attempted, though we did run into some instances where the data was not there. So that's why, circling back to the top of the slides, trying to create processes that will help shore up those question marks so that the full comparison can be completed as you're suggesting.
If I could add, Celia, this is a conversation we can have as a follow-up to this discussion, but I think the part of the challenge that Celia and Ryan face is that they're looking at data based on work orders that we've completed, so work order data and costs, and this isn't really work that we're doing on a full-time basis now. So it's difficult to do apples to apples comparison. But what we do have, of course, we know what it costs to hire a person, we know what their full overhead and cost is with benefits and all, we can put together the cost of a crew, plus the equipment that Chris needs and all of that. So that's more of a calculation of known information rather than a data pool of existing work orders. So it's a different way of doing it. I think we can do that.
And I largely isn't being managed in-house right now. So, right, that information is unreasonable to request even so. So marching on, knowing we have time. So continue, please.
Okay, so to finish up the I&I program, one of the recommendations is to, have hire an engineer to start working with Arcadis, to start to understand the full requirements of the program and plan for long-term project coordination. Right now, all of this work is obviously dependent on the contractor and handled by the contractor. And the team here expressed some desire to start, taking over some of the work and understanding what the program is going to take moving forward and taking over control. Specifically around data, the data management of the I&I program and the model. That's something that's, really fully contractor understood. I think it would be beneficial for LCA to really start, understanding this is going to be a long-term program, that model and that work and how that's going to be done moving forward, to account for, having the internal expertise and also, external things that may happen to contractors. They're not always going to be there. So I think it's important that, we start to understand what this is going to take moving forward. So some of the things in this role, coordinate SES and construction related project work, develop standards for measuring I&I reduction, and communicating that with the DEP to establish that protocol like we talked about previously, developing training program and required work that the field workers are going to do for some of the manhole rehab. So some of these SOPs and stuff around inspections that need to be developed and need to be training needs to be conducted for those types of things. And then the last bullet point, we've touched on this. This person can help really evaluate the internal cost of doing the I&I work versus the contracted cost, and start managing some of those contracts moving forward with some more, concrete data so that you are comparing apples to apples and you do have a true understanding of what it's going to take. So.
If I could add some commentary on this one, for the board members who were part of the prior budget process, we had a position that we were calling the regional sewer program manager. This is really kind of a retitling and refocusing of that position. So it's not actually a +1 on the FT because we already have it budgeted. It's more of a definition of like putting in a definition of that position.
Perfect. So last program to touch on is the affordability program, which is was the most loosely defined program in terms of objectives, but we did hear that there was a desire to better understand what is affordable for the Allentown and suburban customer population with more granularity. So the recommendation here is to extend the capital plan to 20 years, whereas right now, some components are being forecasted out that longer timeline, yet others are not. And this is important pre-work to bringing in someone to do an affordability assessment, since this will certainly be one of the key components to their understanding of what LCA has on the horizon. So accounting for long-term infrastructure life cycles, helping phase spending to reduce rate spikes, just being able to better communicate that there is that long-term plan, knowing that being a steward to the infrastructure that we are currently maintaining is an important message to be able to communicate out to our communities. Then when a partner is brought on, assuming that is the direction being taken for the affordability forecast, their time can be best spent to efficiently gather some of those inputs for their report. Any questions there? We also took a look at the topic of monthly billing, which had been discussed as an option for as a affordability tool. Now we know that going to monthly billing doesn't necessarily change the total impact on household budgets, yet it can create some a better rhythm for engaging customers with smaller budgets. And our recommendation here is to achieve this potentially through technology options that would allow you to break out the current quarterly bill into 3 chunks, as opposed to upstaffing to have more meter techs doing more reads to get monthly bills and having potentially more billing technicians, right, to manage the increased workload around sending out bills at an increased cadence. So our suggestion here being to realize some of the benefits of monthly billing without the increased overhead.
A question, is there any data where someone else tried this and got good, bad, or different results? I mean, in the world out there someplace?
I think there certainly is. It also depends, the benefit that LCA would realize depends on their unique customer population. We know, right? So not to evade the question, but there is a benefit to it, but with the renter population, potentially it could be time well spent for LCA.
I have a question. So, and as we had a previous board member, I think, who was really pushing for monthly billing. And then I don't know what it was evaluated, it was not done. I know other municipalities bill their big commercial industrial customers monthly and then residential quarterly. Where did we leave all that?
To be honest with you, we did look at monthly billing. We looked at it from the standpoint of making it easier for us to account for things, et cetera, in accounting. It's certainly from a financial perspective, a more steady stream of income than you get now. It's easier to manage and forecast. The problem was when we looked at doing it without any significant increase in overhead, it was gonna be very costly to do such. And in fact, we looked at automated equipment, we looked at how many CSRs would be needed, and every time that we came up with that analysis, we ended up going negative on the net present value side. I don't know if there's another shot at the automation now because some of what we were talking about doing years ago required a lot of investment in antennas and stuff like that, which now is not as necessary. So, it's always worthwhile to take a look and say, where are you? It doesn't work. And if it doesn't, at least you know why.
And I'll just add to that, to part of your question. We already bill larger customers monthly. So that's already part of what we do. The investment still would be quite significant on the metering side to get to automated reads. If we don't do that, then we are talking about rolling more trucks for reading meters and the billing functions, the payment entry functions, all that overhead stuff. So I think what we're saying for now is before we add all of that cost to our operation, to take a look at the options that are available in Munis for installment billing to allow a customer to say, it would help me if I could pay monthly. And the system would allow them to pay monthly, whether it's through Munis or through our online bill payment portal. That could be an option to help customers without adding a lot of cost to our operation. Let's look at those options first.
Okay, so for staffing recommendations around the finance and affordability program, we thought it was justified to have somebody that we titled a business kind of rate analysis that could focus on pursuit of grants and other funding. One of the pain points that we talked about with the team was, we don't have any internal resource that's really focused on that. And obviously, if that's something that it could be a huge, ROI with just a couple getting some alternative funding or grants that you wouldn't otherwise have gotten without this person, because nobody's focused on it now. Some other things that this role could do is, analyzing project information for transparency, cost justification and rate approval, consolidating internal and external rate setting and collections processes, and then kind of just working with the communications team and making sure that the affordability and information on rates is communicated well. The justification is there for when it comes to communicating with customers and stuff like that. And then just to support other financial and business analysts currently underway or envisioned, working with contractors as needed and other people who are working on affordability for LCA.
So that is the extent of our recommendations, both process and staffing related. I know that I like how we have been answering questions as we go, though we'll open it up one more time. And we can also provide our contact information or however you would
Other questions after the meeting could come through me.
Certainly. Right.
Just a quick recap. So on this list, which of these or how many of these are actually new? Or are already?
Well, it's probably easier to say which ones are not new.
Okay.
So the lead program administrator is a redefinition of a budgeted position, and the I&I engineer is a redefinition of a position. So the rest of them, 5 for the lead program, the 3 for the I&I program, and the business rate analyst is new. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other question from the board members?
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. Thank you for that presentation and the thoughtfulness that you put into it. Going back to the IT and governance slides, I don't know if you want to circle back to those, but kind of in that your list of recommendations, I noticed security, right? Data governance, data security isn't, as far as I can tell, not specifically called out. Obviously, as these critical infrastructures that the LCA oversees and just where we are in 2025. I mean, do you see, security, security prevention, growth of, platforms and tools that enhance data security as folding into one of these recommendations? Or I guess, why is it not pulled out, on its own?
Certainly. I suppose not called out in terms of the benefit we saw from these from a data master plan was through the lens of opportunity we saw from our assessment and staffing recommendations.
Mhm.
And so I would say that this list is not conclusive for the overall benefits of the data master plan, but those that we highlighted were those that we saw overlapping with the staffing demand or need.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Kind of further along, when you talk about the affordability assessment and the extended capital planning to 20 years, one element you talk about is help phase spending to reduce spikes in plan for rate stability. And so maybe you didn't get this granular in your assessment, but maybe if you could speak a little bit more about, how we're defining phased phase spending. What does that look like, or what was the thought kind of behind that? Given the fact that obviously, the LCA has a lot of ongoing large project costs and capital spending, but all the board members here certainly know we have things that just, pop up frequently and unexpectedly.
Right. Hoping I understand your question. I think we see an opportunity for the capital plan to be a cohesive story of what is all on the radar of the different departments at the utility, and a mechanism for creating kind of a single story, if you will, of what the organization's priorities are in the short, medium, and long term to help with communication to other stakeholders, and a single document for review of those types of decisions. If we add this, what has to go? If we add this, what needs to be pushed out? Totally understanding that things are changing, even in the short term, but certainly at the far reaches of that capital plan. It's not firm, but it is worthwhile getting pen to paper just to hold accountable.
Got it. And then my last question is, I don't know in terms of comparative analysis, when you talked about the business/rate analyst, I don't know if you did comparative analysis to other authorities, but something I think routinely talked about in our staffing for the organization is, somebody who's focused, as you know, on grants, alternative sources of funding. Again, knowing that this is a topic of conversation that could change, here in August 2025, a month, 3 months down the road. Do you find, or in other organizations, that there is a dedicated grant writer or grant administrator, or is there value to a person in an organization of this size solely dedicated to the grant writing, grant administrative role, or is it something that in your eyes, could be folded into that's just one primary responsibility and they have 2 or 3 other responsibilities versus somebody just solely dedicated to a grant role?
Sure. I would say you see it all ways, or in all ways, right? So it's really getting clear on the needs of your organization. But I do think that the benefit to LCA for a full-time position of that sort is certainly bolstered by the needs for some other capacity when managing the affordability study and communicating that, and the priorities that were communicated in our affordability kickoff related to what that role might own. So I would say when I think about our justification for that role for LCA, it is kind of created as an internal need because of those one-off tasks. Though certainly there are contractors to help assist with budget grant applications alone.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm good.
Any other question from the board member?
So kind of a closing comment. So we heard a lot from EMA today and received a lot of recommendations. We also received your feedback. Just wanted to kind of highlight the timing of this. So we were pushing to have this presentation today because we're going into our budget process beginning at the next meeting. So you will see some recurring themes from this presentation in what we present for our budget for 2026, as well as some of the things obviously that we're thinking about. That's kind of the reason for the timing of this presentation now. And if there are additional board comments after you've thought about it and thought about the presentation, you can feed those to me and we'll work on them.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Like we said, we owe you the report in the coming week with the intended audience, not necessarily being the board, because it is going into a level of granularity we wouldn't expect you to necessarily all be interested in, but it could be available if that was something you wanted to request. So thank you very, very, very much for having us. And we'll be in contact, and thank you to the LCA team for being so generous with their time to get us all of the information that we were requesting. You know, in the past few weeks, and Liesl. So we will.
Yep.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you very much. Good travels.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Move to the next item.
Yes.
Next topic is 2026, 2030 Suburban Division and Administration Capital Plan, just for discussion.
Yes, and for this one, I'm going to tee up the presentation for Chuck. And then if it's all right, I'm just going to take a quick break to regroup with them and then I'll be back. So this is our presentation of the Administration and Suburban Division Capital Plan. We did all of this preview the last time around about the different types of planning between our plan, our budget, our project approvals. Again, we're at this planning stage right now. We did the Allentown plan last time. We're doing Suburban Division this time, and that's what kicks off the public comment period. So as we get into the public comment period, we'll bring any comments back to you that we receive from various agencies that we present to or submit to. And so for our Suburban Division plan, this is one of those very unique circumstances where we're saying our plan costs compared to last year have gone down by a lot. And there's one main driver for that. Last year's 5-year plan was $102 million. This year's 5-year plan is $67 million. The main driver relates to how we're thinking about retreatment plant and potentially spreading some of the capital costs over a longer period of time to achieve the same goal. So that has withdrawn quite a few of the costs from the plan. And we've completed some projects too, which is great.
Yes.
Quite a few.
Yeah, one major difference from the Allentown plan is that the lead service line replacement program is not included in this plan. We don't think that we have a lot of lead to remove. What we have is a lot of unknown service lines. So our focus is on the inventory side. And that's the discussion about the Canton server Suburban. So we don't have any costs related to lead service line replacements in the plan. And then the Act 537, we talked about that quite a bit already today. That's going to be submitted potentially next month or in October to DEP, and those projects will be refined as we get feedback from DEP. That's kind of a high level look at the Suburban Division plan. And with that, I will turn this over to Chuck. I'll give you them.
Lisa's gonna
advance. Okay. There you go. Okay. And I will step out for a minute.
All right.
Chuck, take it away.
Hello, everybody. So this is the 2026 to 2030 capital plan. And we're starting with the administrative projects. So here's a list of the administrative projects. We heard discussion about security. You'll see a separate, the fifth project, A-5 is a separate project for security upgrades at our various facilities, cameras, that sort of thing. So we recognize that that's very important. So we have computer system hardware and software. We have GIS, geographic information system upgrades. We have IT master plans. So there's a good deal of money in here, recognizing the need to look at our IT present IT system and assess the needs and improvements. Document management, CMMS, which we talked about that with the EMA folks, and that deals with optimization of our City Works program that operations uses to plan reactive and preventative maintenance. And then lastly, on the bottom is main office improvements. What right now, we have a building optimization study that's in progress that's going to yield capital projects. We don't really have the scope of those projects yet, but we're recognizing that we're in need of improvements here in our main office and some of our other facilities. As you know, we bought that property along Brookside Road. So any costs with renovating that property and bringing that up to code would be under that project. Next slide, please. So here's a removed project and a new project. So the new Munis implementation, thankfully, fingers crossed, we don't have to have another one of those projects anytime soon, because that will be done this year. It is substantially completed. I believe everything looks new from the user's perspective.
Are we stable on using that?
Yes, yep, we went live 2 weeks late, and just 2 weeks ago, we kicked our final piece off of the employee self-service portal, went live as well. So as of 2 weeks ago, whatever the date was in there, we were 100% on the new system.
So everybody's basically getting used to the new system, and it works pretty well, I think. So we have a new project here, and that's improvements to the distribution and collection building over in Allentown. That building is old, it's undersized. There's a lot of issues there, and we have growth. We have office space that's needed, and there's just some restrictions with what we can do to the existing building. And that is further aggravated by the fact that we're building a PFAS treatment facility right adjacent to that building in the green strip along Martin Luther King Boulevard. So that's going to further aggravate, parking issues and space over there for like trailers and equipment storage. So that project, there's no construction costs in there. That's just for planning and design, because we haven't quantified the scope of what that's going to look like yet.
Is there a reason that's not in the city's 5-year capital plan?
Well, that's a good question. We may move it. I think the original thinking was that there possibly could be a shared use with suburban. Looking at you, Chris, I don't know if that's a possibility at all, but we may end up moving that to Allentown division.
Yeah, I mean, as part of the plan, there was definitely one of those no bad ideas. So there has been some talk about combining suburban field services and the city field services for one roof for shared equipment, easier management of staff and projects. We'd have to be super careful about the two different unions, but yeah, so that's probably why it can fall under either spot at this point.
Yeah, so I think we'll know once we complete planning phase if it's going to be a shared use or not, and at that point it would go in the city capital plan if it's just going to be used by the city. Next slide, please. So now we begin the topic of our suburban water projects. This is an illustrative slide. You can see in the light blue, that's what we call our CLD system, Central Lehigh system. That's a lower elevation zone, we call it. And then the green zone to the north of there, we see I-78 passes east to west through there. That's our high elevation zone. That's our upper system. And then in pink there is what we call our Applewood water zone. So the Applewood zone, our reservoir one has a pump station adjacent to it, and that pumps it to that higher elevation. Applewood zone itself does not have a storage tank. The storage tank is in the upper system, right behind the newly constructed Lehigh Hills development, behind the Weiss markets and off of Route 100. Next slide, please. So these are the annual projects in suburban water. We have our annual projects, which is a collection, like we do in the city. It's a collection of miscellaneous smaller projects that we compile into one aggregate project called annual projects. And I'll show a breakdown on the following slide. And then our annual water main replacement projects. And you can see we're not doing a project this year. We will design a project next year and then be resuming annual projects due to budget issues. Next slide, please. These are the different components that make up the annual water project. I won't read these, but it's the same as Allentown. And here we begin our system improvement projects for suburban water, beginning with North Whitehall Division, water system supply study and improvements. We completed the study, and the project right now is basically improvements. About a month ago, the board authorized a design phase for a second interconnection with Northampton Borough Municipal Authority. So that MBA connection will be off of near Sand Spring Road on the east side of the turnpike, and it will run a water line along Sand Spring Road to tie in with our existing system. And that will greatly improve pressure distribution and fire flows in our North Whitehall area. Because right now we only have a single source of interconnection. It's a critical point of failure. If that interconnection would go down, we'd be out of water in our entire division. The next system is water systems master planning and water quality studies. This is just to define future needs for storage and distribution. And it's just a study phase project. The next project, upper system pump station and water main extension. I have a graphic on this. That's one of the following slides. That is a developer-driven project. We are not going to break ground until there's a need, but there's a large vacant tract along Route 78, just north of 78, across from the brewery. If you can picture that, it's owned by Jandal, and Jandal was approached by several companies trying to sell this property. And depending on the water use there, they're going to need more water to be conveyed from our lower system to our upper system. A few years ago, you might remember we put a pipe in across 78. We bought a casing from Upper Mac, and we put a 20-inch capped water line under there in anticipation of this project. So this project is substantially designed. It's basically on the shelf. It's ready for, if the developer approaches us, then we'll enter into a cost sharing agreement, and then we'll build it. So there is construction cost reflected in the plan, but it's depending on a developer.
Wasn't that for a potential dairy or something?
It was at one time, and I think they located in Jersey.
Gotcha.
There's been 3 more after that.
Yeah, they're all like mystery projects.
Yeah. No data centers yet? No.
No, and those use a lot of water.
I know they do.
So, yeah, so we don't know, but I mean, right now we have a design. We think it's the capacity that you would need for like some sort of beverage processing place, but a data center would be a different animal. Next on the list is water meter replacement program. That's an annual program that Amy Kunkel manages. In fact, she's here at the meeting today to ask for approval for another new water meter replacement project. Next is Central Lehigh system improvements. That project, there are construction costs reflected for next year. And what that is an interconnection with what we call the Boards track. It's in South Whitehall Township. And it's another interconnection to enhance resiliency in our central Lehigh system. Next project down is Bush Acres. There was an authorization that was before the board a few months ago I think it was a couple of months ago, to interconnect our Kohler system with Bush Acres, which right now Bush Acres has 2 wells, and we have a well station and a tank there, and the wells were determined to contain PFAS. So this is an alternative to trying to treat the PFAS on a very limited site up there at a high cost. And I have a graphic that shows the recommended route of the interconnection. And lastly, we have Applewood Pump Station. That's in the high system, that graphic that I showed that we had previously with the pink area. That's a pump and controls upgrade of that station. Next slide, please. So here we have a graphic. This is the upper system pump station. You can see the brewery in the lower right-hand corner. And we're already across, we're capped across 78 in the casing pipe that we acquired. And then that's the approximate location of the pump station. We will have to obtain an easement from Jandal to build that pump station. So it's going to be somewhere around there, and then it's going to convey water to the west, where the long tract is. And then what you see, there's a big, I think that's an old quarry or something that's there in the middle, so they're gonna have to deal with that. Next slide, please. This is the Bush Acres water system interconnection. It's kind of hard to see. It's the red line there on the right, and to the left that's the station and the station building. So the red line, it ties into what we call the Kohler water system in Upper Milford. And it goes along Route 29, and then 29 intersects with 100 at the top of the hill where Shimerville is. And then there's St. Peter's. It doesn't go on St. Peter's Road. It cuts back along 100, and then it goes into Stag Court, I think it's called, and is proposed to feed that development sort of in the lower left. That's Bush Acres. And it's about 100 units. So this is in lieu of PFAS treatment, which there's a lot of issues with trying to construct PFAS. What you're seeing on the left there, that site, there's not much more area than what the picture captures. So next slide, please. This is the Applewood Pump Station, which is next to Reservoir 1, above the Lehigh Hills development, behind the Weiss in Fogelsville. And that's just a picture of the inside and outside. And here we have new projects for suburban water. We have a small systems generator replacement project, and this is to put a generator at I think it's our Madison Park North site, and our Sean Spring station needs a new generator, and that's a big one. So that's what the cost is to cover. We have a new project for a leak detection program. That's to purchase a bunch of leak loggers and put them throughout the system so we can better track water loss, which is lost revenue. And we also have a lead inventory program, which, as Liesl mentioned, there's no replacement cost in here. This is just inventory only. Next slide, please. And this is Ed's slide.
Don't go quick. Capital project spending is destined to be $38 million. We should be getting 23.9 of that 38 from operations and existing reserves. We are going to borrow in the neighborhood of $14.1 million. So that is where all the funding is coming from. Just some of the highlights in terms of the operations and reserves, $23.9 million. We're gonna spend 11.5 of that on the annual projects, upper pump system and water main. It's 2 million, water meter replacements 4 million, and then smaller projects add up to 6.3. In terms of some of the metrics, volume, we're going with 1% a year. That's about what we are attaining every year. The rates 1 through 5 seem to be coming out at 3.0. And the 14.1 million of borrowing, assuming no grants, is for main replacement of 8.6. North Whitehall 2.4, West Acres 2.1, and water meter replacement of $1 million. And again, there's a comment about grants on the last three. Just in terms of cash flows, over the period of 5 years, net fund cash flow will be on the positive side. There's 1 year, 2 years actually, 2026, 27 where it kind of starts off where we're using money that already existed, and then kind of gets back on the upward swing. Again, there's the 14.1 million borrowing, the volume increase, total user charge rate increases right now are in the neighborhood of 3% for each year, which I kind of liked. The days cash on hand is all good, about 180, and debt service coverage ratio is in the neighborhood of 2, so that's good. Metrics are good, cash flow is good, but we will borrow, so.
Okay, thanks, Lizel. So now we'll get into the suburban wastewater projects. It's an annual projects. This is like we had for the city of Allentown, under wastewater. These are smaller projects compiled together for one project. Here's a description of what is entailed with that small project. I won't read all of those. Okay, so now we have the Western Lehigh Interceptor and Little Lehigh Interceptor projects. Top one there is Central Lehigh Wastewater Capacity Planning and Expansion. This is something Phil has been intimately involved in. This dovetails with Act 537 planning to gain original or additional capacity in our system. This is just study phase work. Next projects.
Yes. What do you mean by prior budget, 325,000,
Okay.
but the regular budget is 400,000?
Yeah, the prior budget is 2024. Yeah, I should have put 2024.
Okay.
I thought the board might want to see an additional prior year.
Gotcha.
Okay, so the next project there, Spring Creek Pump Station upgrades. So we are finishing a project this year at Spring Creek to replace variable frequency drives and some other miscellaneous improvements there. But the project on here, that's on next year's budget, that is for replacing the pumps. So there's 3 large pumps there that need replacement and associated valving. And that's what that cost is. So likely after next year, this project can go away. We can put this one to bed. And lastly, we have signatory.
Sorry, yes, is that project increasing capacity or just replacing them in the same size pumps?
Same size. I don't think we could increase capacity. I think it would incur planning issues if we had increased capacity.
Yeah.
Like just replacing in kind, we probably don't even need a Part 2 permit.
Okay.
But yeah, at least that's the plan now, to just replace them in kind, Jeff. Last project on there is signatory I&I investigation and remediation. This project is for test and seal, routing and lining along the Western Lehigh Interceptor and the lines that connect. And we have 1.2 million in the plan for that. These are, I like to show a slide like this. So these are completed projects. We can check up half dozen of them off this year in suburban wastewater. So Western Lehigh Interceptor rehab and repairs, we're done with that project. That was mostly manhole modifications to raise manhole tops to above the floodplain elevation. We did a lot of that work, and we've completed that work. The next one, Spring Creek Force Main Condition Assessment. This was assessing the Spring Creek Force Main, the condition at some critical locations where air release valves are located to determine if there was any structural integrity that was impacted by hydrogen sulfide at the high areas in the force main. And what the recommendation yielded was we're okay for now. Our consultant Arcadis recommended that we do another study within the next 5 to 10 years. So there's no impending failure points, at least that we found in the line. The next project that is to be removed is Spring Creek Force Main Turnpike relocation. So along Lower Macungie Road, as you guys know, that the turnpike is being widened up all the way from the mid-county tolls. So with the turnpike work moving in that direction, they reconstructed basically they replaced the bridge. And our line, in widening the turnpike, we had to relocate our line. There is some matching money, but we're on the hook. We were on the hook for close to $1 million. That work was completed. Upper Western Lehigh Pump Station Enforcement Project. That project is in construction right now. The force main was installed, that was completed. But right now, the contractor is constructing the pump station, and that's located right outside our pretreatment plant, just off the parking lot of the Homewood Suites, or I'm not sure what that's called. It's the Hilton. I don't know, that hotel that's on the corner on Industrial Drive.
Chuck, so that project is near and dear to my heart since the force main goes through Grange Park, where I
Yes.
spend a lot of time.
Yeah.
So if someone could go out there and look at the restoration, looks like it could use a little touch up.
I'll refer that to my project manager that's sitting right behind.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Uh,
Okay, moving on. Heidelberg Heights wastewater treatment plant rehab. We've completed all the major projects up there. Don't foresee any big projects on the horizon at that little wastewater plant. So that's being removed from the plan. And lastly, Park Pump Station upgrade phase 2, which is a generator. We replaced the original diesel generator with a natural gas generator. I have a slide to show you the completed project. That project is substantially completed right now. And there it is. There's that beautiful generator on the left. It's pretty hulking, as you can see. And there's on the right, there's a shot of the pump station and the generator. It's going to get a fence around it. So the restoration is not quite complete yet, but that was a success. And here's another completed project. This is Lynn Township wastewater treatment plant. It's a new final clarifier. On the slide on the left, you see the original final clarifier. The plant only had one 20-foot diameter final clarifier. It was never taken out of service since the 1970s. We desperately needed to take that down and service it. And the only way to do that is to build another tank. And also another tank gives us resiliency and improves performance of the plant. So you can see on the right-hand side, some LCA guys are posing for the picture. And that's the new tank. And we did pave that area since I took that picture. So that project is done. Here's a bunch of projects that aren't done. So starting with Linwood, we have an I&I project up there in our North Whitehall division system, Linwood, and we have an annual project to address I&I leakage, damage areas through internal mining, cured in place mining. So we have some design money in for next year, and then the following years we'll be doing some lining work up there. Next project, Linwood wastewater treatment plant expansion. So that project is being funded by a developer. There's a development that's planned adjacent to the Linwood track called Rising Sun. The company is known as Access Rising Sun, and it's about 100 units. And they are paying to design, permit, and expand our wastewater treatment plant, and subject to our design reviews and approvals. So there's just some money, some internal costs there. There's Arcadia West Mechanical Screen. That's our system in the New Smithville area, off of 863, the industrial park, and we're adding an influent mechanical screen to remove all the industrial rags that we get that cause problems at that plant. Moving on, North Whitehall Township Act 537 plan. Phil is working with the township's hired engineer, Barry Isid, to coordinate any impacts that their plan has on our satellite systems. As you might know, there's numerous packaged wastewater treatment plants up there in North Whitehall. And I'm sure the plan will look at possibly consolidating some of them. We shall see that's in the planning process. Heidelberg Heights I&I investigation. This has been a problem area for us. And I'm sure you folks are used to when Andrew has his monthly report, we routinely get issues here with the collection system. We've now replaced all the public side sewer mains and public side sewer laterals. So the only thing that remains, and we rehab the manholes as well. The only thing that remains is the private side, rehab the building sewer from the house to the clean out at the curb line. So I have a project to construct that next year. We're finalizing design right now, and that will go out to bid in a month or so. Next one, Sand Spring, and that will be completed next year, but there'll be other work that continues on. Sand Spring, so again, the monthly reports that Andrew has, we've had a lot of performance issues up there. This is a project to keep some money in there to do some process optimization as we identify the need to do that. Next one, moving down, Lynn Township Wastewater Treatment Plant improvements. So we're going to design some improvements to the aeration tanks out there. They're original tanks from the 70s. There's some mixing issues, some aeration issues. We think we have to replace the diffusers, and take the tanks down to clean. So this is going to be an expensive project with phasing. So that project, there's design money in there for next year, and that project will be constructed in 27 and 28. And lastly, Lynn Township I&I investigation and remediation. We are on a corrective action plan with DEP up there in that system because of some hydraulic overloads in wet weather, and we're required to perform I&I mitigation, and there's money in there for that. And we did extensive rehab up there of the public side, so we're thinking there's probably private side issues there that we have to attack. So that's what that project is budgeted for. Here we have our Arcadia wastewater treatment plant, Arcadia West. This is the industrial plant out there in New Smithville area. That's the plant on the left, and on the right, that's not Arcadia. That's just what the screens are going to look like. They operate under pressure. You basically pump the water through them and they remove the rags. So there'll be there's two SBR tanks, two parallel tanks. There'll be one dedicated to each SBR. This is the Wynwood plant. This is the plant that the developer is going to pay to expand in the yard area that you see in the forefront on the left. That's where an additional tank will be located. So that's moving. That's in the design phase right now. These are the pretreatment plant projects in suburban wastewater. So every year we have what we call the annual improvements. This is just smaller annual capital improvements that are made out there. For instance, it can be replacing pumps, doing pavement rehab projects, replacing valves, compressors, that sort of thing. Critical upgrades project, that's the next project down. So that project will be finished next year. And what we're doing there, we're rehabbing the two final clarifiers. We're replacing all the mechanical equipment, and we're doing some improvement work on the air decks mixing system improvements. We're replacing a return activated sludge line. We're installing influent meters and some other miscellaneous changes to basically maintain the level of service at the plant for the next 5+ years. And we also completed a major upgrade of the cryogenic plant of what we call a cryo, the oxygen plant. And that was completed this past summer.
This is about the $5 million money that we.
Yeah, well, we have $4 million budgeted for this year. And then next year, we'll use up that money, but with finishing the upgrade, we're gonna upgrade one of the final clarifiers this year and the next one in the spring. So there'll be money that will be spent next spring, and then replacing, there's a return activated sludge line that pumps sludge from the basement of the building that's located between the two final clarifiers, pumps it to the head of the air decks, sort of reseed the system, hence the phrase activated sludge. And that line will be replaced next year as well. So that budget will cover that, and then we'll close that project out. And then lastly, we have what we call our long-term upgrade / replacement project. There's been a plethora of studies that have been performed of the plant over the last couple of years. Jacobs did a master plan. There's been all sorts of studies looking at what's the future of the plant going to look like, 10 years from now, with whatever industries are served by the plant. So this project is basically the long-term upgrade, the plan after 5 to 10 years from now. So, and the difference in the cost, when Liesl presented that slide, this year's capital plan versus last year, some of the major impact in reducing the capital plan was spreading out those long-term improvements, not trying to do them in 5 years, but spreading them out over 10 years. And that made a big impact in the capital plan. So here's a picture of the two final clarifiers. They're 100-foot diameter. It's a big job to replace all the internal, the rotating mechanism and the bridge. There's a mechanism on the bottom that scrapes the sludge and it gets sucked out and gets either wasted or returned to the head of the air decks. So there's a lot of work associated with this project. So one of the tanks, number 1, will be done this fall, and then number 2, we'll do it in the spring. This is the cryogenic plant on the left. It was built by Air Products in the late 80s. That tall box that you see in the picture, that's what we call the cold box. It's at approximately minus 270 degrees Fahrenheit. And that converts, I don't know, it's like magic. I don't know how it works, but it converts air into pure oxygen through extremely high pressure. There's a 1,000 horsepower and an 800 horsepower compressor that force air basically into that system and into that box, and it makes oxygen. And then the oxygen is stored in those two horizontal tanks. And you can see on the right, the archaic controls, like anymore, it kind of looks like Star Trek to us because we're so used to seeing like human machine interface screens with our SCADA systems. And that was like a dinosaur of SCADA, but it still works well. But we did some major upgrading of that system this year to buy us 5 to 10 years of life. And that's that project. So this one, I don't know if this is your slide, Liesl.
Yeah, I can touch on it. Actually, it's the subject of a discussion item that's on the agenda later today.
Right.
So just to acknowledge that the overall replacement or upgrade of the plant is still a need here. And a lot of the decision-making is focused on the industry, what happens with the industries, who's staying, who's going. We already know that Boston Beer and Ocean Spray are going to be doing their own on-site retreatment, and that will change the nature and scope of this project. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes.
Here we have the only new project in suburban wastewater. We have a small systems generator replacement project. And this is for a new generator, I believe at our Lynn Township facility and Heidelberg Heights facility. And this begins Ed's financial.
Well, this one's a little bit easier to read than the last one. $34.2 million of money is what we're spending, and as you've heard, that's significantly lower than where we were in the 5-year period last year. How much is coming from operations and reserves is about $11.7 million. We are going to borrow $22.5 million to make this happen. You can see the cash from operations on 11.7. That's going to fund the annual projects at 3.2. 3.2 in PTP and 2.3 in the Western Lehigh Interceptor Group. And then the other satellite systems would be $2.9 million. The borrowing of 22.5, that is being paid to the pre-treatment plant. And obviously that is very contingent on what happens with the decision-making and financing. Busy cash flows, which is that we were using reserves in 2026, 27, and 28. We get back up on the positive side, and overall for the 5-year period, I think it comes out to be just slightly positive. User charge revenue increase, it kind of goes up and down, and that's really attributable to how much pay-go is being built into the signatory buildings. The good things are, in terms of days cash on hand, will be at 200 or slightly less at 199, and that's the lowest that we were at. Everything else climbs back upward. Debt service coverage ratio, even with the new borrowing, we go from 2.6 to 1.7. We slipped a little bit, then to 1.7 and 1.6. So overall, it's still better than our internal target. And I think the commentary is what I mentioned on the rate analysis is because of the signatory base.
So the recap of the plan, I think we went through it rather quickly, but the big highlight is that we're decreasing the plan by about $34 million, and that's driven by the pretreatment plant upgrade strategy. There are still quite a few unknown factors that we're going to get into in the next presentation that will shape how that project comes together. With the borrowing that Ed reviewed, we're maintaining financial performance in both funds, so that's great. The rate impacts, however, we just need to again say that those are really revenue projections, not rate projections. We get into the rate calculations more specifically when we get into budget for how that works through the signatory process. So that's an important piece. And then as the 537 plan gets approved and moves on into implementation, we will start to see some projects come back into the plan in the 5 and 10 year timeframe. Looking forward for suburban wastewater. So here ends the presentation of the suburban plan, and the public comment period will commence now, today.
Yeah, it'll get posted to our SharePoint site.
Great. And then typically we do receive some form of written comments from the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission and the City of Allentown. I'll be working with the county on a presentation. If they'd like to have me come and present or Chuck come and present, we always offer to do that. And of course, the municipalities get a copy, Boston gets a copy, et cetera. So that's all we have for this one.
Any questions from board members? Hearing none, we move to our next topic, which is underwater. is the Suburban Division 2025 water meter replacement. It's on green page, papers, digital package, pages 6 to 8.
Okay, Amy Kunkel is going to present this project. This is to furnish and install almost 1,700, mostly residential meters in our suburban, our CLD system. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy.
Yeah, so the project is one of our kind of annual replacement projects that we do. We had one last year. We're currently doing one in the city. This year it's about the same size and scope as last year's, about 1,680 meters. We replaced, we're doing it again through CoStars, through our through Core and Main, who is the contractor and the supplier for the census meters that we use. There isn't a whole real lot to talk about it. The contract for the material and the installation is for $552,043. And then that also includes a little bit of contingency and then staff time to take it to a total of $592,043. And we expect to get that started in the next couple of weeks, pending approval here. Not really sure how much else to add to it. It's kind of cut and dry here unless somebody has some questions.
Any question from board member?
I move we approve this project.
Second.
So the capital project for the water meter replacement was motion by Linda and second by Ted for the amount of $592,043. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any objection? No? Okay. We got the money.
I'll put that one thing too. The meter replacement folks will give us line composition in the home, so it'll help beef up our inventory as well. So it kills two birds with one stone. When we replace the meters, we'll understand what we have in the homes as well.
Yeah, we did. That is included. We've added that as a line item where they take photo documentation and identify the incoming lines for $6 a site, which I don't think you can beat.
Good deal. Moving to next topic on the wastewater suburban division in industrial pre-treatment plan master plan for discussion.
All right, so I have another presentation to share, and I'm going to try to move it through relatively quickly. I would consider this to be part 1 of 2. Today, I wanted to review some of the financial legal background around the pretreatment plant and why we are where we are with it. And then in September, we'll have an engineering update, which is long awaited. So we're excited to see the results of the additional engineering evaluation. So they kind of work together, but breaking it up into 2 parts so we are a little more efficient with our presentation. So the pretreatment plant, most of this should not be new to any of you, so I am going to go through it rather quickly. As we've been talking for the last 3 years, the pretreatment plant, it requires significant upgrades due to age and risk of failure. And we've been trying to work through what the options are and how to address those issues as well as serve the future industrial needs of our community. And one of the questions that we've been asked is about this backlog of capital investments. How did we get here? We had, as Chuck mentioned earlier, we had a master plan done in 2022 that came up with a price tag of $267 million worth of work, which was a huge amount of capital investment needed in the near term. So we looked at a bunch of different things, how we got here. There's some historical perspective I'll share, the human component, and some constraints related to contracts and revenue. There's a lot on this timeline, but some of the key highlights, I think, for the board's awareness is that this has been going on for a long time. Since the 1960s, the county had prioritized bringing food and beverage manufacturing to Lehigh County, including the development of this site out here in Fogelsville, which they owned and operated all the way through 2006. In 2006, they turned the plant over to LCA and for operation. And in 2009, they gave it to us for $1. And that's important because it's an important factor because we recognize this asset as a fully contributed asset rather than one that we funded ourselves. So that becomes important when we talk about tapping fees and how we recover costs. So for a period of time, we operated as is, and then beginning in 2016, we started investigating how we could expand capacity for the growing needs of the area, and then really diving in over the last three years or so, and trying to push toward a decision this year if that's at all possible. There are some barriers to that for sure. So this is a little bit repetitive, but for the first 10 years or so, we were focused on operating this plant kind of as is and managing based on the revenue that was available, and then started in around 2016 looking at expansion or upgrades that might be needed. However, even with that focus, we were focused more on capacity development and not routine or repair and replacement type projects. So when we got that master plan in 2022, we were a little bit shocked by the price tag for sure. So, you know, we have some lessons learned from that whole process of how we've managed this facility for sure. The revenue constraints are significant for us at this facility. It is a very unique facility. We have three main sources of revenue. The hauler program is a very robust program, about $3 million a year of revenue, but the pricing there is market-based. So, you know, the haulers that are coming to our facility could go not anywhere, but they could go other places. They come to us because we're priced according to market and because of our location. The municipal revenues that we receive are based on intermunicipal agreements, not based on cost. So it's kind of a tied into all of those intermunicipal agreements. And then the brewery is our one and only direct customer, and the revenues there are based on costs somewhat, but they're constrained by the contract that we have with. So a lot of constraints in how we make money. This is just what it looks like in a breakdown of dollars. So in 2024, we received about almost $10 million in revenues at the pretreatment plant. A couple additional details on some other contractual constraints. We do have a contract operator there, and the contract sets the fixed fee that we pay and variable costs based on flows and loads, but we don't have great visibility into the actual cost that they incur to operate this facility. And that makes it harder than it is at our other facilities to know, like, how could we be more efficient, or how could we save money or optimize operations. I mentioned the brewery billing agreement, that's the only revenue stream we have that's tied to cost, but there are rate caps in place that really constrain what we can do there. And then the intermunicipal agreements are really both the costs that are passed to pretreatment and the revenue we get from municipalities are fully based on contracts, not tied to cost at that facility. So it's a real challenge in terms of bringing in or changing the revenue picture. Got to change the contract to change the financial structures, the bottom line. We look at our expenses, that contract operation bucket of $6.4 million in 2024. That's a huge number with not a lot of detail about what drives that number. So that's a challenge for us. And then the treatment and transportation, the 1.9 million, that's the charge that the facility incurs based on the intermunicipal agreements for
Question.
service. Yes, sir.
If we knew the cost,
Mhm.
which is embedded in the 6,000,003, what difference would it make?
Well, I think that it's not so much about the cost as we don't have control over the operation at all. So if we knew more about what the cost drivers were and how the plant was being operated, we could maybe source products differently, or we could staff differently. The operation, I'm not saying that this is a bad cost or a good cost. We just don't know. So if there's
Would there be
operational.
any virtue in trying to get
Sure.
a handle on what the real number is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jacobs has been at the table and willing to talk to us. Their contract runs through 2028. So I think we're just sort of putting it out there that this is part of what we need to talk about with them to understand what's driving the costs and how much is driven by.
So we're going to pursue that and hopefully get a number.
Yes.
Jacobs.
We also, I believe we're looking at UHA. I believe we're getting some analysis from our engineering firm, which is not Jacobs, on estimated operational costs, so we can compare somewhat.
We're the electrical and the chemical piece, we're independently looking at that. The labor piece, we don't have a separate analysis for.
So just to follow, so when an audit's done for LCA, the auditor accepts that number, they don't require a backup or a breakdown of all of those costs
So
to be provided?
Yeah, we get a invoice that includes some breakdown, but it's based on contracts. So Chuck you review those contracts or those invoices.
Yeah, it's per pound of there's variable cost per pound of BOD, per pound of solids removed or flow. It's either BOD or flow related to different components of the variable.
Why is there a
fixed
cost differential due to that stuff? Is that expense driven?
I think the assumption when this agreement was initially conceived was that the labor and the chemical costs were partially a function of the strength of the wastewater coming in. And that also affects the pounds of residuals that need to be hauled off site and disposed, which is part of their contract with Synagro. That we don't pay separately for that. That's included in their fee. So the strength of the wastewater affects the volume of the.
So we really, and I'll look this along, but we really don't know the relationship between what we're being billed and the actual costs.
Yeah,
it's another disconnect.
Right.
Yeah.
So from the standpoint of like an audit, we can tie the invoices to the contract and say they're billing us properly.
I understand that, yeah.
But we can't really look at their invoice and say this is how much it actually costs to operate. So I put this information up because we just saw the capital plan numbers for pretreatment, and we see in 2024 about $1 million or so in capital expenses. We were able to get into the mix for that year, but because we're so constrained on revenue, we're also then constrained on capital, and that's an evaluation we do every single year to see how much we can get into the mix for this facility. $1 million a year or $700,000 a year, which is more typical, is just not enough for a facility of this size. There's a couple of other constraints. Borrowing capacity is somewhat limited because the revenue is not secure or flexible. So going to the bond market based solely on pretreatment plant revenues is a bit of a challenge. And then, as I alluded to earlier, tapping fees, which are a collection of fees for new connections from new industries that might locate here. We're not able to collect tapping fees here because the facility was fully contributed to LCA. And that's a constraint within the legislation around tapping fees. So that's been hard for some customers to hear, that the industries didn't contribute tapping fees to this facility, but that is the reality of how we're set up.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If a decision is made to go ahead with a new facility, will the brewery and the other one stay with the new facility or still build their own?
So we know that Boston Beer and Ocean Spray are building their own facility. They're working through it. I think Ocean Spray has equipment on site. Boston Beer broke ground late last year to lock in on some tax credits that are available from last year. So they're moving forward on those. And what we're evaluating now, and what AJ and his team will present next time, is really what does the facility look like without Boston Beer and Ocean Spray in terms of capital investment requirements.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and that really just brings me to the final piece, which is how do we implement the changes that are needed here, given all of these constraints and the things that I just reviewed. And certainly a key component, I would say the most important component, is industry participation. Coca-Cola, Synopta, and Keurig Dr. Pepper are the three industries that require pretreatment service, whether they do it on site or participate in our project. If we're going to do a project, it's contingent on those three industries participating financially in that project in some way. We're pursuing potential other funding partners with the county, the township, and potentially there's state funding out there that we haven't identified yet, but we'll be looking for to help ease the burden where that might be possible. We do have the robust follower program, so just need to look at how to fully leverage that to get some additional funding in for those related costs. And then kind of the last three are really about like how going forward we look at rates ongoing into the future. They really need to be tied to cost, so that we know that we can continue to invest in the capital requirements for this facility, and getting a clearer handle on what the costs are, the operating costs are. Those are two really important components for the sustainability of this facility. And that last bullet about risk is a conversation that we have to have before we decide that we're going to invest in these facilities. We need to really understand that this is a risk, not only to LCA, but also to the industries, because we're reliant on such a small number of industries. We need to just wrap our heads around what happens, for example, if one of the three major industries were to leave. How would that change our financial picture? And is that a risk that makes sense for us?
Could you go back to the revenue slide? So the brewery is okay. So the industries that are staying around are included in the municipal revenues?
Yeah, sort of. It's a really backwards way that we get money through these municipal revenues. It's through the intermunicipal agreements where we charge to the municipalities where these industries are located, the value of the amount of waste loading that is removed from the pretreatment plant. And that value is calculated based on the intermunicipal agreements, not actual cost. So it's like a chargeback. So we've removed all this waste from Upper Macungie Township, just to pick on them because that's where this is located. We removed all this strength at the pretreatment plant from Upper Macungie Township, and there's a calculated value of that waste that was removed.
So the three industries, the three that are hanging around yet, will still use the facility. How much are they paying
That's the part we don't know.
We don't know that either.
We get that from our calculation of everything through the township, but what, like we have good relations with the township, we can know that, how much they pay, but how much they pay to the township is tied to the township rates, not.
So we're running a business that we don't know the expenses or the revenue.
Yes.
Yeah, good. And no one will loan us money. I wonder why.
Well, we need to work all that out and make that a lot easier to understand and have a little more control over the revenue and the expenses.
So in regard to the tapping fees, so if someone new moves in, they don't purchase any capacity?
They purchase capacity at Allentown.
Okay.
And they purchase, and their tapping fee covers capital costs for capacity at Allentown and Western Lehigh, pump stations, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But no capacity charge for the pre-treatment.
Correct. Correct. And that has been since day one, the situation. Yeah. So that's really all I have in terms of presentation, and kind of get your mind thinking about the constraints around how we operate today. Then next time, it'll probably be 2 meetings from now, maybe, or 2 or 3 meetings from now, we'll do the engineering side, and what that might look like. I think it's important to understand this background when we think about what's next in terms of the projects from an engineering standpoint.
Any question from the board? Yeah, one more question or comment. So in regard to Boston Beer, so they just charge a lot, right? 1 million, 2 million gallons a day, some number.
It's about 1.3 right now. They're a little down.
And they have fully evaluated and broken ground to build a 1.3 MGD treatment plant, basically, right? To get their solids and CBOD loadings down to, because there's not capacity at Allentown, right, to surcharge them or anything like that. So they are doing that, and that's more cost effective than participating in the pretreatment plant upgrade.
Yes. Yeah, the pretreatment plant
Just makes me scratch my head. I can't.
project it's very challenging because you're trying to take waste streams from multiple different entities that have different constituents and different characteristics. Plus there's domestic waste and then there's hauled waste. So it's a different design criteria than a brewery saying, let me build something that's specific to my waste. And so, and then it's on their site. So they own the land. They don't have to transport it anywhere. All of that is kind of going into their calculation. Some of these other facilities like Dr. Pepper and Synopta, for example, they don't own their property and they don't have a place to put it. So it's a different kind of constraint for them.
So is Ocean Spray also opting out because of cost, like Boston Brewing?
Yeah, I mean, it's primarily cost, and they also own their property and have a place to put the unit that they're putting in place. It's a relatively small unit and they're not a huge discharger to begin with. So pretty small footprint.
So, and the risks remaining to the other beverage producers is low because they don't own the property and they can't.
Yeah.
Their volumes aren't high enough.
I think each of those 3 industries has different business decision criteria for like what they're willing to invest in this local facility and how long they plan to be here and whether they own the property or don't own the property. There's a lot of factors it's driving their decisions. And what I mentioned previously at the start of this is that getting the industries on board and participating has been, I think, the biggest challenge because we need their commitment to participate in the project for us to have a project. We're still working that.
Any other board question? Lisa, I think from my perspective, you have 2 challenges. One is the short term, because we keep borrowing money without getting that money that we are borrowing, they are not paying us. We're charging the other side of the organization, which I don't know is correct or not. So we gotta draw a line saying that, guys, if you're not paying, I'm just simplifying, I legally, I don't know what we can say. This is our, if you don't pay for this 2 years project that we can be operational, in 2 years, we're gonna shut down. So we have to regulate our budget on the money and capital we spend based on 2 years notification, we're gonna shut down. Otherwise, we spend 5 million, we're gonna spend another 4 million, and suddenly we have 15 million in pre-treatment plan. In 2 years, they're gonna leave, and all of those have no good. And then we stuck with I'm simplifying, $15 million capital that we're spending. So somehow we gotta put our foot down, and I don't know how, but we gotta be very clear that we can't just dump money in it without knowing what their intention is. And then second thing, obviously, with the 3 remaining things that are they willing to make a long-term commitment, and how legally they're bounded to that legally commitment over 10, 15 years to pay for the capital.
And the Olive program is a big asset for this region too. I mean, that's
the other thing.
that's gotta be a big factor. I have one more question, I apologize. So and I'm sorry, I'm stuck on this whole lost and mirror thing. If they build their own plant, they're discharging wastewater that's domestic level, then they're gonna have to do something conveyance wise, so that is not going through the pretreatment plant? Because like it obviously goes there now, so is that gonna be diverted to another interceptor and then simply just make its way to Allentown? Or they have all of those improvements to do as well, or how does that work?
It will be reviewed in more detail when we do the engineering review, but essentially they can bypass that whole, they dump into a line that comes to the pretreatment plant. That whole line can be relatively easily bypassed around the pretreatment plant. So they wouldn't have to do that. It'd be something that we would want to do to get their flows out of the plant.
The lines do this. One goes that way, easily connected to. They're right next to each other. So you just basically jump the 2 lines and that's all it is.
Because before the pretreatment plant was there, it just continued downstream.
Right, yeah, that's what I was asking.
So that's a simple fix.
Ocean spray's already on that line, along with other waste streams are on that line. So bypassing the pretreatment plant will have some benefit of reducing hydraulics, loading to the plant as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
It's a tough topic because a lot of money that we have to put in there without knowing what the return on our investment are.
Yeah.
And one of the obligations of the board is to really be careful in approving the budget for the pre-treatment plant without knowing what that return on investment is going to be. Moving to the wastewater, the next topic is Klein Island weather improvement phase 1 approval. Is a yellow pages, digital package 9 to 23.
All right, Chuck.
Okay, so last on the agenda under wastewater, Amy Rohrbach is going to present this project. This was authorized over a year ago for design of wet weather enhancements over at Klein's Island. We call the 100 MGD project. It's so that Klein's Island can treat peak flows up to 100 MGD wet weather flows. And since design inception, since design authorization, some out of scope improvements were discovered that were needed. These are value added improvements since design was authorized that we would like to include in the design. These improvements are compatible with the major capital improvement project that receives substantially complete design approval by the city. So these improvements will be consolidated into the major capital project. And the big financial weight of this change order is replacement of influent gates and also advanced procurement of some long lead time equipment. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy, who can get into the details of this project.
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, as Chuck said, this is a
professional services amendment to Kleinfelder's existing contract that you did authorize a little over a year ago. Lisa, you can go. So just a summary of what we're doing for the 100 MGD improvements. We have the 4 existing pumps in the main pump station that we're upgrading to increase capacity. We're upgrading the 2 pumps in the auxiliary pump station to increase capacity. And then there are 5 existing primary effluent pumps in the intermediate pump station that are getting upsized to increase capacity so we can get the 100 MGD through the plant. And then the last component is I hate to use the word bypass, but it's an in-plant bypass to bypass the rock media. So during wet weather, up to 50 MGD will bypass the rocks and go directly from the plastics to the finals. Because of the constraints with the rocks during the wet weather, we can't push 100 MGD through. So that is the third component of this. So you can keep going, Lisa. Thank you. So the timeline, May of last year, we received conceptual design approval from the city. And then in June, we received authorization from the board for the final design and bid phase services with Kleinfelder. We started design. We submitted to the city, and in April of this year, we received major capital improvement substantial design approval from the city. And around that same time, soon after that, we discovered that the existing main influent gates, when we took the one wet well down for the influent screen for some maintenance, we realized those gates do not hold. They're not sealing properly. So I went back to the city and asked if we could add the influent gates to the project. May 28th, they gave the okay to add it. They just asked that we update the capital cost recovery calculation, which had been submitted previously. So it'll include this new cost. So we went back to Kleinfelder and asked for an amendment. And all along during the design, there were some other little things that popped up. Some things we had directed them to do based on various things, which I'll get in more detail in a minute. And others just came up as the nature of the design. As you know, you go from preliminary design, which is very high level, and get into more detail, things rear their ugly head, so to speak. So August is why I'm here today. August 25th is for this authorization request for this amendment. So we'll go into more detail. There's 8 different components, 8 tasks as part of this amendment. The first, the risk-based replacement of the PLCs. There are 2, that's programmable logic controllers. And for those who may not be familiar, they're like little computers. And they have input-output points, and we tie everything back into data using the PLCs. So it's very critical for our operations. And during the asset management ratings that we recently completed, we ranked 2 PLCs that were in need of immediate replacement. And those were not included in the initial Kleinfelder scope, one of which is in the which, Lisa, you can go to the next slide because this will show like kind of a, one is in the auxiliary pump station and one is in the intermediate pump station. And since those are both part of this project to begin with, it made sense to just include them because we're already working in there. We're gonna have an electrician in there. So we directed Kleinfelder to add those, so they had to reach back out to their electrical engineer to add that work. So that's one component of this change. The next one, originally we had thought we would have the contractors do some test pits before they start construction to determine where there might be conflicts with other underground utilities. But after some more thought, we decided it makes more sense to do it during design so we can avoid those conflicts and any potential change orders. So we had 3 locations where LCA contracted separately with an excavating contractor to excavate those test pits. And then Kleinfelder brought in a local surveyor to survey those elevations and where all those crossings were in the areas where we're going to have underground in infrastructure. So the change for this task is for that surveying, for that Kleinfelder consultant. The third component is the screen chamber concrete repairs. Upon further inspection by our plant staff, we determined there were some areas in the influent screening area that it's the one picture you can kind of see the concrete, the other is a little harder on the right, but there's some spalling concrete, some exposed rusting angles that hold up grading that we walk on. So we decided now's the time, we're gonna be working in here, we're gonna have a contractor here, we're gonna have things out of service. It's best to design this now rather than wait and try to do this later. So that is the third component. Then there's the overhead bridge crane in the main pump station. It's not sized. The capacity isn't enough for the new pumps because they're larger motors. So we need to redesign that. And when Kleinfelder reached out to the crane manufacturer, there's a lot of very tight constraints in there, putting this new crane, overhead crane, bridge crane, which is higher elevation wise in the building. They needed to put together a detailed CAD file, a computer, aided drafting design file, in order to be able to accurately depict where it was going to make sure it'll fit. So that costs more money. And then the next one, so the parallel line, we originally had it in the preliminary design in a different location. Upon further investigation during once we got into the detailed design, it wasn't going to work in that location because of conflicts with existing utilities. So there was some additional effort on Kleinfelder's part to redesign the new location, which actually is much better idea than what was originally thought of once we got into more detail. So on the little ellipse on the right is where we thought it was going to go. It was more piping, more conflicts, more crossings. The area on the left where that circle is around the existing distribution chamber at the ISTs, a lot easier to navigate, a lot less piping involved, and it'll just bypass right into the line that goes, the effluent line that comes from the rocks, and right to the finals to avoid those conflicts during the high flows. And then the influent gate replacement. So this is the big one. So there's 4 gates. There's the 2 on the left are the main influent gates, and the two that you see on the right are isolation gates. So the gates and all of them were put in around the same time, the mid-60s. So the thought process is they're 60 years old. If the main gates that we saw are leaking, the other ones are leaking. Because 60 years is a long lifespan for these gates. So this is where a lot of difficulty in the design comes into play, because we need to bypass the entire plant flow when we replace these gates. That is a lot of bypassing. So we need to determine where we're pumping from, where we're pumping to. The 60-inch influent line doesn't have a manhole on the plant inside the gate, inside the fence line that we can bypass from. So that's an area we have to look at. There may need to be a new, what we call a doghouse manhole. They set it over the existing line and then cut out the pipe. That needs to be constructed. It's very deep. It's about 20 feet down, we're estimating. Until we get into more detail, we don't know the exact. About 20 feet deep. It's gonna be a large manhole, large structure. It's gonna involve some structural engineering to design. So there's a lot of effort into that, and a lot of effort into planning the maintenance of plant operations during this bypass to make sure that we don't have an issue at the plant while this work is being done. So that's a big chunk of the amendment. So the total for all of these tasks is $253,090. I break it down in my memo in each task separately, but I missed one because I didn't have a slide for it. Before, on the list of tasks in my memo, there was also the pre-purchase of equipment. Once we got further into the design and talked to our engineers, they gave us lead times on some of this equipment. The pumps are 12 to 15 months. The electrical gear is closer to 18 months, 15 to 18 months. So due to that long lead time, We decided it would be in our best interest to pre-purchase to try to shorten that duration from the time we get the notice to proceed to a contractor, so that we're not waiting after we get a contractor on board. So we would pre-purchase and then turn it over to the contractor once it gets delivered to the plant. So that is also a large component of this amendment, just the design effort to put together separate bid specs, separate documentation, put it out to bid, handle questions during bidding. So Kleinfelder's assisting us with that effort. So we originally had an authorization for $994,450. We're asking for another $253.90. So the total for the design and bidding phase services with Kleinfelder will be $1,247,540. That was really fast, but I know we've been here a long time, so happy to answer questions.
Any question? I have a quick question.
Sure.
When we do have the bypass,
Yes.
I recall correctly, you said we cut out the rock. So is that correct?
During the wet weather, we can bypass up to 50 MGD of the flow, and it'll go right from the plastics to the final settling tanks. It will not go through the rock media. And the thought process is during wet weather, it's mostly water anyway.
I understand all
And
that.
DEP has given us the permit, by the way.
But people time to time ask me about this, and they get horrified by the notion that we're dumping, partially untreated sewage into the Lehigh River.
It's not untreated. It still goes through the treatment process.
That's where my question is going. The fact that it misses the rocks, what do the rocks do that this water is missing?
Andrew looks like he wants to answer this.
So at Klein's Island, there's 2 stages of biological treatment. The first one being the plastic media stripping filters.
Yes.
And then it would go through settling. The rocks are just another biological stage of treatment. So by doing this, it is still getting biological treatment through the plastics, which takes away the majority of the VOD. The rocks are more or less like the finishing stage. So when you do have a bunch of ionized water coming in, you're already diluted and you're still getting the majority of the treatment.
I understand that.
I just want to be clear when we're using the term bypass, when we look at Andrew's compliance report, it says bypass. That's not this kind of bypass. It's just a diversion. Yeah, an in-plant diversion. That's a better word.
By saying, well, we're only missing the rocks.
Yeah. And it still goes through, the chlorination process. So
I understand all that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question?
Now with the gates, you show the design of it there. Is the failure on the gates themselves or the ceiling surfaces and the housing? Have you looked at all that to see?
I'm not
Totally sure,
Yeah.
likely the ceiling surfaces, but so we can inspect further. It's a little
You
difficult.
haven't inspected for it yet, but the difference perhaps in the cost.
Any other question for him? No. So we seeking authorization in the amount of $253,090 for the Allentown Division Klein Island weather improvement phase 1.
I'll second.
Good. Motion moved by Peter, second by Sean. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good luck, Amy.
Thank you.
We're moving to the monthly system operation, is that correct?
Yeah, the financial review we just received this morning, so we will review and distribute. that
Okay,
report to the
that's
board
fine.
Separately. The operations.
It's all yours.
All good. So in front of you, you do have the July 2025 operations report. We will start out with safety incidents. So there were 3 in July. The first one was an incident where an employee was trying to start a concrete saw. It was sort of seized up and he ended up hurting his wrist. That was a recordable incident and the only recordable for July. The second one, was a finger injury from a pipe. And then the last one was a tree fell onto one of our fences at Reservoir 3.
And just a quick question here. Do we have JSA for all the equipment and do we review that, update that on quarterly, yearly? And, and then also when the people check the equipment, like how often do we check the equipment and mark that equipment as being certified to be used by the employee?
That's a bad question.
Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna be satisfactory. We don't get anything officially certified. We do have a staff member at the DNC and our field services that are kind of our small engine guys who go over our stuff once a month or so, verify that valves are in the right place, that, carbs are cleaned and all that stuff. But to get something, externally examined and certified, we don't do that.
How about the JSA? How often do we update those and make sure they're updated and being implemented?
So I believe that is one of the priorities of Jeff, our safety guy.
Yes.
Who he's looking
at PP&E, he's looking at jobs, he's looking at job safety analysis. He's doing that on a daily basis in conjunction with a number of other endeavors going on with respect to plant security, et cetera. So JSA is something that we are doing on a regular basis.
Moving on to water production and wastewater. Everything is pretty typical for this time of the year with the water production at Allentown, 24.42 million gallons per day. Moving down to Klein's Island wastewater, we're at 32.7 million gallons per day, which as I mentioned is very typical of this time of the year. We did receive 3.93 inches of rain in July. However, there were no incidents related to wet weather to report. We did receive one notice of violation. That was from the city of Allentown. And that was in relation to the last two bypasses, not the bypasses of the rock media, but the bypasses of the treatment facility back in April and June. The letter was attached to this. We have not responded at this time. We were given 30 days, so we will have response completed and submitted to the city by the end of this week. And that will be included in next month's operations report. There was one also, boil water advisory. We did have a small main break. It was actually in between the parking lot of the water filtration plant and distribution building. It was very close to the flood wall and it was pretty deep at that time. We brought in J.O. Bradley under emergency situation to replace that line. And because of that, there were 3 customers that did not have water for that night. So they were issued a boil water advisory. One of them happened to be the distribution and collections building. So we issued a boil water advisory for ourselves. Moving on to the next page. We had a pretty good month. As I mentioned, we did receive the NOV from the city of Allentown, but there were no permit exceedances, no bypasses, no SSOs at any other location. Yeah, other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any question for Andrew? We're very early down, everybody's so tired. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. Staff comment.
I have nothing.
No comments, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any public comment?
No, thank you, Amir.
Yep, no, thank you.
Jay. Any board member comments? Just a comment that there is a very short executive session after this meeting. I promise you, it's going to be very short. So I know I'm tired, so please hang on. If there is no other things, meeting adjourned. Thank you for all your participation. Have a great week.
Thank you.